Hello guys, today I'll show you how to play against the Italian game if white plays very normally, very simply here. So we start with the move e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c for the Italian game, and then we go for knight f6. Here if knight g5, then it transposes into the fried liver attack, and you can counter that by playing Traxler counter attack. I have made a complete video on the Traxler counter attack. You can check it out by clicking the link in the description box below. So if your opponent plays safe and defend this pawn, he has quite options like queen to e2, pawn d3, or knight c3. If knight c3, we can take the pawn, which is the most common tactic in chess in the 4 knights, because if knight takes, we can play d5 to 4, and if queen e2, then we can play bishop to c5 and then castle. And the best move in this position actually is to play the move d3 to defend this pawn here. So now we can play bishop c5 and prepare for short castle. Now a very common move actually is to play the move castles, because you have developed your minor kingside pieces and you castle short to take your king to safety. So after castling, we can play d6 to defend this pawn, and now we can play knight to e7 and knight to g6 to pressure this king side. After this, if your opponent plays knight to c3, we can play pawn to a6, because if you don't play pawn to a6, rather if you castle short, your bishop will be gone after the move knight to a4, and you would be down a bishop pair. So we play a6 to vacate a7 square for the bishop to move. So after this move, a very natural move would be to play pawn to b3 to develop this way, and after we castle, bishop comes to b2, then we can play knight to e7 to play knight to g6. So after this, a very common move would be to play h3 to prevent any bishop or knight to come to g4 square. So we are stick to our plan and play knight to g6. So after that, here if your opponent plays like pawn to a4 to push on the queen side, we can play knight to h5 here. Look, in this position, also wait, also if your opponent doesn't play a5 and plays knight to e2 here, which is another common move, we can play knight to h5 as usual. And now comes the decisive moment. If your opponent is copying you and try to bring another minor piece into the game to save their king, then they are in big trouble, because if they play knight to g3, we can take, pawn can take because it is pinned, and if it threatens our bishop, we can take because it is hanging. We'll play knight takes through. So after this is a huge blunder, knight to g3, because we can take, pawn can take because it is pinned, and rook had to move, and we can play like knight to h5 again. So here, if they play a5 here, a4 here, sorry, we can play knight to h5. In this position, some of you might say that white has a cool tactic here, like knight takes pawn, opening up the diagonal of the queen to attack our knight, and our knight is not defended. So if we take the knight, then we are down a pawn after taking the knight. But we can play knight to g3 here, attacking the rook and taking advantage of the pin here. So after this, rook moves, knight takes knight, and pawn can take again. So if knight doesn't take here, and just simply plays uh, like pawn to a5 lazily, then we have the move queen to f6, threatening to go knight to f4 and then play queen to g6 to mate. So in this position, he will try to bring their queen into the game. If they move their queen away from this diagonal, then we have a cool tactic here, which is bishop takes h3. If pawn takes, then knight takes, the queen takes knight, and then we can play knight to f4 and the mate is unstoppable here. And if they doesn't play queen move and plays knight to e2, that again blocks the queen from defending the knight, and we can take advantage with the move bishop takes. So all in all, it is very unpleasant, and I will show you a line that will lead to a checkmate, like bishop to d5, like a random move, like your opponent like plays the random move. You can play knight to f4, and if pawn here, we can take, pawn can take because it is pinned, and if we removes the pin, we can play queen to g6, and the mate is like unstoppable here. Rather than if knight here, we can play queen here, and if pawn, then we can sacrifice, takes, threatening this and this, and if the knight moves, then takes here, and after this is a mate. So this was the Italian game, simple opening but a deadly trap. Here you're most likely, you have to attack with as many pieces as you can as the Traxler. You might have to sacrifice your pieces in the last of this deadly trap to checkmate your opponent king. And you can also play not queen to f6, but to play the move f5 here. The point of f5 is to break the center and bringing your rook into the game as well. So these pieces are way more powerful than these pieces, which are not doing anything in this position. That's the beauty of this trap. So hope you enjoyed this trap. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, and subscribe for more some content. See you guys in the next video.